Hi guys, Cilla here from Normal Suburban Moms. This video isn't one that was recorded for this channel, but it was what led us to start this channel. I actually recorded it for my own personal channel, and so it's uploaded over there too, but it seemed like it was only fitting to have it on this channel since it's what really inspired it. So it's just a breakdown from an educator perspective about queer kid stuff. We'll cover what we feel is wrong about it, along with how we felt like it should have been handled. So here it is. Thanks for watching.
Hey everyone, I'm Cilla and this is my wife Shannon. You may or may not know me from other channels I've had in the past. I know this was the first video on this channel, but I did used to have a channel that was called JOF TV that has a lot of videos on it, and I've done some other videos here and there. Took a hiatus a few years ago because well, I got cancer. Hence, if you've seen my old videos, I had really long blonde hair and everything. And obviously now I don't. Chemo will do that. So I have been wanting to get back onto YouTube, but I actually wanted to wait until I grew my hair back out and lost some of the weight that I've gained during both chemo and quarantine. Oh, for those wondering, I am in remission. I think I forgot to mention that part. So,
and the hair is growing back.
And the hair is growing back. But I was planning on, getting back down to pre-cancer weight and pre-cancer hair before I got back on YouTube. But something came up that I really, really felt passionately about doing a video for, and didn't feel like it could wait. And I don't know if one person or 100 people or however many people will watch this, but I at least want it out there, available for people to see. I feel like it's a really important topic. So here I am. First of all, let me give a basis of what this video is going to be about. We have stumbled across a web series for kids called Queer Kid Stuff, and on the surface this sounded like it might be kind of interesting. Obviously we're LGBT. I myself am bisexual.
I'm pansexual.
And we're married. Have been for
almost 4 years.
Almost 4 years, yeah.
This fall.
So we're definitely part of the LGBT community in that sense, and our daughter also happens to be a lesbian and dating a trans boy. So, these types of issues are important to us, so we checked it out. But we're also educators. I have been a daycare teacher for about 7 years. I ended up leaving the field when I got cancer because when you're undergoing chemo, it's really not a good idea to be around toddlers, as they are little petri dishes, and physically it's just next to impossible to keep up with them. I also have a bachelor's degree in educational studies. So, and I'm working on being certified to teach high school English. So I have a lot of education in my background, and specifically a lot of experience working with the toddler age group.
Should I throw my credentials out there?
I was going to say, my wife has educational credentials too.
Yes. So I spent 3 years as a parapro in elementary special education. As I was working on my degree, I have a degree in special education. I currently teach high school English, resource and inclusion. And I also worked at the same daycare that she worked at over the summer, just subbing. So I have some experience with the younger kids too. And I'm also working on a master's degree in education in instructional design. So I have a little bit of a background.
Mm-hmm. And so when we first watched Queer Kid Stuff, we were initially, to put it quite frank, horrified at what we saw. So the next thing I did was look up the individual behind the show. Her name is
Lindsay.
Lindsay.
I don't remember her last name, but her name's Lindsay.
So I looked up her credentials to see if she had educational studies in her background of any kind, or any experience working with toddlers. So far as I could tell, her only degrees were basically in theater and gender studies. So really nothing to indicate she had any experience with early childhood development or education or anything of that sort, which immediately to me explained why we were seeing what we saw. Yeah. And so we just wanted to cover both what we saw that we found troubling about the video, and then also offer some advice if you really do want to talk to your kids about the LGBT community, an age-appropriate way to do so.
Sorry, camera keeps moving.
So, where do we begin with this?
So, first of all, I want to say I think that Lindsay is a good person. I think that her heart is in the right place.
Oh, I think
she really does have the best interest of kids at heart, and kids that may be LGBT. I really think she's trying to do a good thing. I genuinely do.
The execution leaves something to be desired.
Yeah. So and we've attempted to contact her. We reached out to her, or Cilla reached out to her. Sent her a DM. We haven't heard back from her, but we would love to. Because honestly, if she wants to keep doing queer kid stuff, in a way that maybe less people will find it cringy, like, we would love to help.
Yeah, and it is very cringy.
Yeah, so I took some notes just watching a few videos. I'm not gonna necessarily reference specific videos. I didn't put the titles down, but she's on YouTube. You can go check it out. Her channel is Queer Kid Stuff.
And frankly, I don't want to put any clips or anything in this video because I do find it to be very age inappropriate and don't really want to promote it any more than we already are.
Yeah, and that's really, like, I think our main issue is just that it's not age appropriate for her target audience, which is admittedly
toddlers.
Yeah, toddlers. She says it's for all ages, from babies up to your great-great-grandma.
Which is all well and good, except for the babies and toddlers part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's specifically looks like it's aimed at toddlers. It's set in the vein of a lot of that age group of kid shows that I have seen, like Blue's Clues, and
she has her talking teddy bear. She has wooden blocks to spell words out.
Right.
Things like that really catch the eye of kids in that age group.
Yeah, it's definitely in the same vein of stuff that I've seen toddlers in my classroom be a fan of. Mm-hmm. So I can see where, on the surface, it would definitely draw the eye of a child that age. Mm-hmm. The problem is the content.
The content. It's just not age appropriate. So she does have educational materials that she offers on a website called Teachers Pay Teachers. I didn't know what this website was until I got into education, so if you don't, it's fine. But basically, teachers create educational content and lesson plans and printouts that other teachers can pay for and digitally download and print out for use. It's a really awesome website. But she says that she put together her instructional materials in collaboration with the It Gets Better project, and I'm really curious to know what credentials the people there have, if they have any educational credentials too that helped them develop that material.
I will say I did look at the Teacher Pay Teacher stuff, and while I don't know what's in the lesson plans or anything because I didn't look at it, I did kind of look at what was included in the poster packs, and it's not something I would ever put in my elementary classroom.
Yeah. And I didn't look at the lessons because it is for pay, and I'm not going to buy it, so I I kind of looked through to see what was offered, but that's pretty much it. So I think she probably looked at it more.
And after seeing her show, honestly, I wouldn't buy any of that material, because if it goes along with the show, then it's just not something that I think would be very age appropriate or useful.
Yeah, but admittedly, like, I haven't delved too deep into it, so I would be interested to know, like, how she got that collaboration, what the credentials are of the people there at the It Gets Better project.
Right, because if there's no educational credentials involved in the making of that material, then I find it to be almost insulting that she would presume to give classroom teachers material that she hasn't made sure is age appropriate for the teachers to use.
Right.
But we won't delve too much into that because we don't know the entire story about that. So the rest of this is pretty much going to focus on the show itself.
Yeah.
Starting with the title, to be quite honest with you. Queer is not a word that really needs to be in a toddler's vocabulary. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Queer as Folk is, like, seriously my favorite show of all time.
It's amazing.
But it's also not a term that a 3-year-old necessarily needs to have in their vocabulary.
No, and it has historically been used as a slur. I know a lot of people are taking it back, and I kind of consider myself in that group too, of like, it's my word, it describes me in a way, so if I want to use it, I will. But it's not really appropriate for toddler age or like early elementary age. First of all, in that age group, they don't even get the concept of that word. They don't understand. I have notes I'm looking over. But basically, like she says, even 0 to 2 years, they can learn this stuff. So, in that age group, they're still in the sensory motor stage of cognitive development. That means that they coordinate their senses with motor response, they have sensory curiosity about the world, they only use language for demands and like cataloging things, and they're still developing object permanence, which means that they're still developing their sense of just because I don't see something doesn't mean it's not there, which is a very basic kind of concept.
In fact, in my older toddler classroom, which was 12, I did younger toddlers for a while at 12 to 18 months, and then also 18 to 24 months. And in both those age groups, one of the common activities on our lesson plan was to get a solid scarf and put a toy under it, show the child a toy that they wanted, and then cover it with the scarf and see if they would then come and take the scarf off of it, if they knew the toy was still there even though they couldn't see it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time, you didn't start seeing them take that scarf off on a regular basis until they did get close to 24 months, until they were getting close to moving up out of my classroom. Because that's one of the ways of teaching object permanence. And there's there's different skills. I know a lot of people think daycare is just basically babysitting, but it's actually not.
There is curriculum, guys.
There's a lot of curriculum, and there's lesson planning to be done. And I would write weekly lesson plans that went pretty in depth sometimes with certain milestones that need to be hit and how to go about hitting it. And for those of you that don't know anything about childhood development, the skills that we're talking about, like sensory motor, these are all part of Piaget's theories that are, they're proven. They're used by pretty much any educator.
And while they're not concrete and set in stone, it's a general guideline to development.
And every kid's going to be different. You're not going to hit 24 months and all of a sudden a switch flips about object permanence.
Right.
That's not how this works. Some kids will get it at 18 months and others will get it at 26 months. Every child is different. But there is also guidelines to follow to keep things in an age-appropriate way. And the concept of queer to adults can be so in flux as to what it means. you can't really expect a child to understand, nor can they really understand how to use that word in context, especially given its history of being a slur. They don't understand the concept that we're taking it back, or that somebody may use it as a slur. There's a lot of connotations that come along with it that's just not necessarily age appropriate. So that was our first issue. But the shows just got more problematic from there. The first episode actually was halfway decent. I'll give her that.
Yes.
In fact, half of the first show really could have been the whole series. She discussed
for that age group. Yeah.
For that age group. She discusses how some families have two mommies, some have two daddies, some have a mommy and a stepdaddy, and that's fine. In fact, that's how I taught, if you want to call it LGBT stuff, in my classroom. And I'll get more into that in a little bit. And that's really all that needed to be said. But she goes on to, gay means happy, but it also means that when a boy loves another boy or a girl loves another girl. Well, first of all, kids don't understand multiple definitions for the same word at this point in their life. And second of all, while obviously you're not going to discuss sex, you really don't, you're going to confuse them because they don't understand the difference between romantic love and love yet. Yeah. So a little girl that loves her best friend will go, oh, I love my best friend, I must be gay.
And that's not the case.
No, and it does.
Most of the time.
And at that point, it does start to come off like indoctrination, which our community is always being accused of, and I'm starting to see why. And this isn't helping. There is an age-appropriate way to handle this, and this isn't it.
Yeah.
But, you know, you don't need to go over what bisexual means, what transgender means, what all the different genders. One of the things that I was most upset in the whole series, and I think you might agree with me, is that she actually says that it's weird how doctors assign sex to babies.
Yeah, she's like, and I'm paraphrasing. This is not a direct quote, so I don't want to be accused of misquoting. I'm completely paraphrasing. But she says something like, isn't it weird how doctors assign gender at birth, or assign genders to babies, or something like that? And we're like, no, it's not weird. It's biology. They're not assigning your identity or your expression. They're looking literally at the baby's genitals and saying, oh, that's a male, that's a female, or that's intersex, which is a thing that happens, that can be observed at birth. That's a deformity.
And by convoluting that concept for kids, you're explaining something so abstract that they don't understand. Even once you get past the I'm blanking on the stages all of a sudden. Once you get past the sensory motor stage and get into pre-operational?
Pre-operational, yeah.
Then you still aren't getting the abstract concept of gender that is being pushed.
No. So children, they go through these different stages. There's 4 stages. It's easy to look up. It's Piaget's theory, which is Piaget.
And any educational psychology class is going to be heavily based on this.
Yes, Piaget is like...
They drill it into us.
So there's 4 stages, and you don't get to the last stage until you're around 11 or 12. And that's when you start grasping abstract concepts such as gender, such as queer, such as, you know, sexuality in general, love, hope, ideas that you can't see and touch. Before that, they're either sensory motor, which is up to around 2 years, or pre-operational, which is about 2 to 7 years, or concrete operational, which is 7 to 11 years. All of these stages, the kids are really just operating on what they can see, what they can touch, what they can manipulate with their senses.
Piaget, one of my favorite quotes, and I'm paraphrasing, but he made a comment that I used anytime I had a meeting with a toddler parent, because it's one of my favorite things. He said, all toddlers are little scientists. And that is so accurate. They're looking at the world around them and what's observable and what they can see.
Yeah, they're exploring, they're observing, they're categorizing, they're, learning the differences in things that they can see and touch. They're learning, I like this food, but I don't like that food. Like, they're learning everything. But it's all observable things. That's what scientists do. They deal with what they can observe and manipulate and categorize. And that's the stage that these kids are in.
And so giving them these abstract concepts that they can't yet absorb isn't doing them any good. And in some cases, the way it's presented can be confusing. For example, in an episode about bisexuality, she actually says bisexuality is cool. Well, what kind of message does that send? Or bisexuals can love everybody. Well, okay, but that's not really the whole story. And you can't get into those nuances with a kid. Not only will they not understand it, they don't care at this point. And then she had some videos for adults as far as tips for teachers. And let me just tell you, some of this is the worst advice that any teacher could do. If we did some of this stuff, we'd be fired.
Yeah, and I want to unpack a little bit of that. So she has classroom tips. Keep it gender neutral. Call your students friends instead of boys and girls. That one actually is implemented in every elementary school that I've worked in, which has only been 2, but the same district.
And every daycare I've worked at, which has been several.
It's, to call kids friends, but usually it's like you don't want to call them students or kids or, this or that. So gender neutrality is in young childhood is already a thing that is done. So that one, I'm like, okay, sure.
It is a little annoying to teachers sometimes because we have this whole everybody's friend. I'm not going to go into that.
That's a whole different video.
That's a whole nother video. I'll just say participation trophies have ruined us and leave it at that. But moving along, getting back on topic.
The next one she says is, don't assume kids have a mom and a dad. Well, that's kind of duh, yeah. And I have made the mistake of assuming that, and the kid says, oh, well, I don't have a dad, or I have 2 moms, or whatever. And my response is, oh, okay, I didn't know that, now I do. Thank you for telling me that. It's simple as that.
It's not that big of a deal. She makes it sound like it could be really traumatic if you assume it, and
it's really not.
It's really not.
It's simple. Kids know what parents they have.
If you don't make a big deal of it, they won't. Mm-hmm. Now, the next one.
Don't be afraid to answer questions about sexuality. So, outside of a high school GSA, no.
At all. No. And especially in preschool or elementary school, that is not something you handle. That is something that if we talked about with students, we would be so fired. Yeah. And to tell a teacher that they need to do that to be inclusive or woke is putting their job on the line, and it's very irresponsible.
It really is. And the best response, I try to give alternate responses to things that I don't agree with, so that I'm not like, teachers should just freak out.
No, no. That is not what we're saying.
A good response and a professional response to that is, well, that's a really good question. You should ask your mom about that, or your dad, or, whoever you have at home, because, you're going to know who your kids have at home.
Or your parents, or whatever.
Whatever. But, yeah, that's a really good question for your parents. Do you think you'll remember? You can even say, hey, let me know what they say about that. Just to show interest, so you're not just blowing the kid off.
You don't want to blow them off for sure, because you want them to know their voice matters. But there's a time and a place, and there is a position as a teacher you hold in their life then boundaries you don't cross. And that's one of those things that it's up to the parents.
Yeah, in preschool and elementary and really even middle school, like, that's the parents' job to answer those questions. In high school, it's different. They're more mature, they're formal, operational.
And even then, it's not really a teacher's place. Even in a high school setting, it's not like we talk about sexuality with our students, with the singular exception of being GSA sponsors. So that's just not a teacher's place in most cases.
Don't do it.
Now, the next one.
So this is like talking about your class library. Find LGBTQ plus books for kids. I agree with that, and at the high school level, we definitely have that. However, make sure it's age appropriate. Jazz Jennings wrote a great book called I Am Jazz, and
it's
wonderful.
It may be the single best child's book about a trans kid I've ever seen. It's brilliant.
It's definitely age appropriate for preschool and young elementary. It's great.
It covers it in a wonderful way that doesn't introduce terminology that's inappropriate for the younger age group.
Books like Mommy and Mama, that just shows a different family. I think that's great. So, yes, include that.
But make sure it's age appropriate, because there are certain books, like, and to be fair, I haven't read this book, but title alone makes me weary. A for Activist.
I haven't read it. I probably will at some point. I'm not sure if that's appropriate or not.
I will check it out. And I, maybe making another video in the future saying, hey, I was wrong about that book. But just on the surface from the title, it doesn't sound like it would be age appropriate.
And also, while you're including LGBTQ plus books in your classroom library, make sure you have age appropriate books about and by people of color, different cultures. Like, be inclusive. Don't just have some LGBT books because you're LGBT. Like, really be inclusive. If you're going to talk about inclusivity, make sure you're actually being inclusive. In our teacher libraries in the high school level, we have, oh my gosh, what's that book? So we have The Nowhere Girls. That's a great book that has LGBTQ plus characters, and it's all about girls and, like, being strong. It's a fantastic book. And we also have I'll Give You the Sun, which is about a boy that's gay. But we also have books like The Hate You Give, All American Boys, like some pretty, like, maybe controversial books, but they're inclusive. And we have, the books about race and feminism and, LGBT and
basically you want
all kinds of things.
You want a variety of books for kids to look into. You don't want to push anything unless it's for a specific assignment.
While we're at it, books about disability too. Like, include everyone.
Yeah, you want to have books available for kids to look into. That doesn't mean you push a specific book unless it's for a specific assignment.
Right.
But you have it available for them. And that's one thing in the area that we happen to be in. The school does have a lot of diverse books available to the students. You just need to make it available. If kids are interested, they'll look into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
the next one. Tell students your pronouns and ask for theirs. No. For one, it's awkward.
It's very awkward. I'm sorry. I do not want to ever live in a world where our introduction is, hi, my name is Cilla. I identify as a cis bisexual female, and my pronouns are she and her. That's so long and awkward.
So
and
no one needs to know right up front what my sexuality is or how I identify. If you can't tell that I identify as a woman, I'm doing something very wrong.
Ditto. And second of all, if you do that in a high school setting, it can be traumatic for the students. Because if you do have a transgender student in your classroom and you're asking each student their pronouns, you may be accidentally outing somebody.
Yes.
not all
not a good thing.
not all parents are okay with their kid presenting as trans and don't necessarily know they do. So students don't necessarily want to be outed at school. They may have one identity at school that they hold on to and one at home. You need to be respectful of that. The way to handle it is to make yourself available and open for a student to come up to you and say, hey, I know on the roster my name is Thomas, but I go by Julie and prefer to be called she, her. And you simply say, okay, Julie, thank you for letting me know.
Mm-hmm. You make a note of it.
At that.
Make a note of it. Respect it.
Make sure you put it in your sub plans for any teachers out there.
Oh my gosh.
I will say I've been a substitute teacher for the past years. I've gotten into the workforce after recovering from chemo, and I will say one of the most annoying things to me is when I have a transgender student in the class and the teacher did not leave me notes, and I misgender the student because of what's on the roster because that's their legal name. Yeah. And then I feel terrible because I didn't know any better. Yeah. So one thing I will say is if a student does tell you their name and gender is different than what their biological name and gender is, then leave it in your sub plans. It'll make it easier both on the sub and the student. So that's my piece of gender advice for teachers is if a student does come to you, just make sure that you respect that even when you're not there.
And we do have trans kids at the school that I work at, and subs can be a nightmare for them, for sure.
Yeah, and it's not because they want to be, it's because the teachers don't think about leaving that in their sub-plans. Some do, very few. I've had a few that did, and I was so grateful. And then I have most that don't, and I've misgendered different kids a few times, and I feel terrible. A couple of them ended up being in the GSA that we were co-sponsoring, so I got to know them a little better, and I explained how frustrating it was as a sub, and they understood it was hard for them, and they acknowledged that it's hard for them to have subs, but they also understood where we were coming from, so we did have a good dialogue about it. But that is some good advice for teachers.
Definitely.
But don't start class by asking students their pronouns because that can be a very uncomfortable situation for some kids, especially if you accidentally out them. It can also be uncomfortable for certain students that maybe have religious beliefs that are a little stricter about transgender, and then you're creating an uncomfortable situation for multiple students in your classroom when all you really had to do was make yourself open to the students to talk privately, and then everyone's just more comfortable.
Like I said, be inclusive, be equitable, but inclusion and equitability it means everyone, not just your trans student, not just your gay student, not just your student of color, everyone. Just try to be fair and equitable to everybody.
And to me, that's what teachers are supposed to do. I don't care if your student is trans or hardcore fundamental Christian or Jewish or black or brown or white or special needs or whatever. You want to set an environment as comfortable as you can. Obviously, someone's going to get offended at some point. Somebody's going to be uncomfortable, especially these days. Everything's offensive. But you want it to be as comfortable of an environment for every type of student as you can.
Yeah. Okay, going on to her episode on drag.
Oh.
First of all, the concept of drag is hard for kids to get. Again, concrete operations, what they can see, what they can, observe. And
this is coming from someone that was a drag king in her 20s.
Yes. I have pictures to prove it. I didn't do it a lot, but I did do it, and it was super fun.
And she hung out with drag queens. She did drag shows herself,
constantly.
She loves the drag community. She was part of it. So we're not dragging on drag queens.
No, but it's not really a concept that young kids understand, and just she used probably the most like gender bending drag queen she probably could have found. He had quite the beard. And
very dark, like black makeup.
Like black makeup that was like big. And like I'm sure that she's fabulous. I would watch her. I would be entertained. I'm an adult. But for a child to see this man and then snap, it's what looks like a woman, but it's kind of like scary makeup and has a beard, that's super confusing.
And I can tell you, as a kid, I would have been terrified of that because I already had a phobia of clowns. To this day, I have a phobia of clowns. But when I was a little kid, it was really bad. Like, to the point of I would go into a meltdown if I saw a clown. My mom would have to get me out of there. And so I can tell you, seeing something like that would have scared the bejesus out of me as a little child. I find it a little unsettling as an adult just because I do still have problems with clowns and the uncanny valley theory and there's psychological stuff that goes into it. But as a child, I'd have been straight up afraid. And
yeah,
I wouldn't have understood what I was seeing.
No, not at all. So, like, me as an adult, like, I'm like, you do you, boo. And
yeah.
As a drag queen, like, I'm sure that she's amazing. Like, and I'm not sure.
Go be fabulous.
Yeah.
For adults.
Go be fabulous. It's cool. And she explained that, when she's in drag, she prefers she, her pronouns, but that Teddy can call her anything that they want to. I'm not sure if Teddy is a boy or a girl, and that's a whole other issue. That's another video.
Teddy goes by they, them pronouns.
Okay, so there you go. And again, the pronoun thing that's a different video. But, like, I don't know if this queen was Lindsay's friend, that she was like, hey, come on my show. And, like, I get that, but she has degrees in theater studies. Is there no other performer she could have gotten? Because I feel like if you're going to present drag,
which really isn't an age appropriate concept to introduce anyway, but if you must.
But if you're going to present drag, I would start by presenting, just performers. Maybe show like some pictures of people in some interesting costumes, like theater performers, Cirque du Soleil, just different costume, and then say you can also use what the opposite gender usually wears as a costume, and you can wear makeup if you want to, whether it's to make you look more like a man or more like a woman, to have fun and perform songs.
Although, to be honest with you, it's still not age appropriate.
It's still not age
appropriate.
appropriate.
The concept at all.
At all.
And I really had a problem that she just compared it to playing dress up.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same. And, like, I'm one of those that I'm like, you can dress up as anything. Like,
yeah.
I have a daughter, and I wasn't like, you have to dress up as a princess. I'm like, whatever you want to dress up as, I don't care. Dress up as a cowgirl or cowboy. Like, I don't care. But, like, it's not just like dress up. It's completely different.
No, and we've never put dress up restrictions on our daughter. Our daughter has dressed up as Supergirl, and she's also dressed up as Castiel from Supernatural. So, whatever. But that's different than saying that drag is just like dressing up and introducing that concept, which kids aren't really ready for. And honestly, drag queens are adult performers anyway.
Yes.
They're at their best when they're in a drag club. And that is not a place for kids.
No. It's definitely an adult form of entertainment. And I have been and taken my daughter to family-friendly drag shows. And they really did keep it family-friendly. But normally it is not. And if you've been to one drag show, you should know that. And I'm sure Lindsay has.
I'm sure. So basically, a lot of the topics on the show itself just aren't topics that really should be presented to kids because it's just not age appropriate to teach those concepts yet, and it's not age appropriate in the way that she goes about it.
Right.
But I feel like we've covered that enough, and we have been talking for a while. But really quickly, before we wrap up, I do want to spend a couple of minutes, because we said all the things not to do, and we threw in a couple of things about how we would do it. But I just want to briefly cover, if you do want to handle LGBT topics with your kids, some age-appropriate ways to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I did as a toddler teacher, and none of the parents in my room had an issue with this at all, is I actually wrote a book myself. I found a bunch of images of different types of families. Some were interracial families, some were Asian or black or white. Like, I had multicultural pictures with different kinds of families, and I don't remember what order they were all in, but it was basically amounted to, some families have a mommy and a daddy, some have two mommies, some have two daddies, some have one mommy, some have one daddy, some have an aunt and an uncle or a stepmom, and like just all these different types of families. That is how you teach that concept to kids, because if you're teaching them that all families are okay,
Mm-hmm.
as they grow up and develop and eventually come into figuring out what their sexuality is, and they will figure it out on their own, they will realize, oh, well, if this family with two mommies or two daddies is okay, then that must mean it's okay for me to like someone the same gender and have a family like that of my own someday. Like, they'll get the concept, they'll make the connection as they grow up and are able to understand it. So that's like really all you need to do. And then as far as gender, you don't need to explain the concept of gender to kids. Any person I know that actually is transgender with gender dysphoria has known from a very early age that they had gender dysphoria. They, at 3 or 4 years old, as early as they could communicate, have said, if they were, a biological boy, have said, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. What we need is to teach parents how to accept that. Don't encourage it, don't discourage it, just accept it.
Mm-hmm.
And, let the child be a child. You don't need to say being transgender is cool, or you can use these pronouns or those pronouns. It's too much. Let the kid be who they are. And that's all you really need to do. Another thing that I did in my classroom was we had family boards where I had kids take home a small poster board, put some family pictures on it, and then we would put it up on a wall that I had with like border and stuff called Family Wall. And I made a family board too that had a picture of me and my wife and us and our daughter, and
I think our dogs too.
Our dogs, my cat, my parents, like just my whole family, and I had it labeled. And when she worked at the same daycare as me, I would say, this is Miss Shannon, and they would say, oh, are you sisters? No, this is my wife. And we didn't make a big deal of it. It was what it was. And you had the same thing in elementary school.
Yeah, when I worked in elementary school as a parapro, I had one student in particular that I can remember. I know it happened on several occasions, but there was a student. I was in an inclusion classroom. It was one of the gen ed students. It was just kind of a time where kids were doing centers and coming up to the teacher and asking questions, and I was kind of helping my student and chatting with the teacher a little bit. It was a pretty relaxed time of the day. And this little girl came up to me, and she was so cute. I loved this kid. But she was asking the classroom teacher about her husband, and she was telling her stuff, and she looked at me and she was like, are you married? And I was like, yeah. And she said, well, what job does your husband have? And I said, oh, I don't have a husband, I have a wife, and she's a daycare teacher. And she just went, oh, okay. And that was it. Like, it wasn't a big deal. I didn't make it a big deal. I didn't say, oh my god, I don't have a husband. Like, no, come on. Just, like, state the facts. And kids are, like, they'll take it and leave it. I remember my mom told me when I was a kid, kind of an older kid, that mine and my sister's pediatrician had told her when we were small that information about sex, and I think this kind of falls into that category too. Information about sex to kids is kind of like food. You give them the facts, they'll take what they need, and they'll leave the rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple. It's like they don't need overcomplicated things. Keep it simple. And if you do want to discuss, LGBT and all the different things and stuff with your kid, like, if you need to, that's fine. If you come to that decision that you want to teach them about that, please reach out to an educator and ask them what the most age-appropriate way to do it is. Because I feel like Lindsay's channel, like I said at the beginning of the video, I think her heart's in the right place. I think she really wants to do a good thing with this, but it's just not age-appropriate.
No, it's really not. She even in her transgender episode goes into... she has Riley Dennis on there, and they go into hormones and estrogen, and no,
kids don't understand that stuff.
If
they're not
you have a transgender person in your family that's transitioning and you need to actually explain it, first of all, unless you have a reason to, you don't need to touch on it. But if somebody in your family is transitioning and it does need to be addressed, just say something to the effect of, well, so-and-so is transgender, which means that they, even though they're this gender, their brain tells them they're this gender, so they need to make their outside match that, so they have to take some special medicine for that. You don't need to go into that it's hormones and this and that.
Just, it's the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Like, just keep it simple for kids. That's all they need, is a simple explanation that makes sense to them at their cognitive level.
Right, and that's the key, at their cognitive level. And
not yours.
And talking in a sweet voice and talking to a teddy bear doesn't automatically make it age appropriate.
No.
There are ways to go about this. There are ways to do it. There are ways to make it age appropriate. There are ways to introduce these concepts. And quite honestly, you don't need to make a big deal of it, because if you make a big deal of it, kids will make a big deal of it. If you treat it as all families are different and some people are just different and that's okay, they'll accept it. And honestly, it'll lead to greater acceptance in the end, because you won't be pushing concepts that they can't really comprehend yet.
Exactly.
And when you do, you're really alienating parents and educators.
Yeah. So, Lindsay, contact us. We'd be happy to help, but, we'd be happy to help make it age appropriate and more, age appropriate.
I guess in conclusion, what I'm saying is we don't need queer kid stuff. We just need kid stuff.
Yeah. Talk about all kids.
And that's all I got.
Yeah.
So this wasn't intended to throw any hate on Lindsay. Like we both said, we feel like her heart was in the right place, but I felt the need to make this video because I, as an educator and a mom and a bisexual, I really had an issue with the way this was presented to this age group. And so I really wanted to get this information out there. I saw a lot of people talking about queer kid stuff, but not a lot of people talking about how they were making fun of it. They weren't necessarily talking about why it was an issue developmentally, and they weren't really offering a lot of solutions for how it should be handled. And I feel like that's important. So I really wanted to get this information out there. Whether one person watches it or 1,000, at least it's out there. And that's really the best you can hope for.
Yeah.
So
that's it.
Thank you for watching. And bye.
I don't know.